At 3,000 feet down in the open ocean, sunlight still reaches, but there is not enough of it left to see by. What arrives is a thin blue that carries almost no energy, and a few hundred feet below this point, the instruments stop measuring it at all. Every animal living here has built its body around that one fact. This is the Twilight Zone. Ocean scientists call it the mesopelagic, and it runs from about 650 feet down to about 3,300 feet. It sits directly beneath the water that sunlight owns. By volume, it is the largest animal habitat on this planet, and it is also the least explored place of its size anywhere on Earth. The descent starts at the boundary. At 650 feet, roughly 1% of the light that struck the surface is still present. That is the working definition of where this zone begins. Photosynthesis stops being possible somewhere around this line, which means nothing below it grows food out of sunlight. Everything here either swims up at night to eat, eats what falls from above, or eats something that did one of those two things. The water gets cold fast. Through the top of this layer, the temperature drops off a shelf that oceanographers call the thermocline. By the bottom of the Twilight Zone, the water sits near 4 degrees Celsius, about 39 Fahrenheit, and it will hold close to that number for the rest of the descent, no matter how much deeper the ocean goes. Pressure climbs on a straight line. Seawater adds 1 atmosphere for every 33 feet. At the top of this zone, that is about 20 atmospheres. At 3,000 feet, it is roughly 90. At the bottom boundary, it crosses 100, which is about 1,500 pounds, pressing on every square inch of everything down there. Now, what lives here? Start with the most numerous, which are the lanternfish. They are small, most of them shorter than a hand, and they are among the most abundant vertebrates on the planet. What makes a lanternfish is the row of light organs running along its belly. They are called photophores, and they do not work the way a lamp works. The fish reads the faint light coming down from above and matches it, glowing downward at exactly the brightness of the water overhead. Anything hunting from below looks up and sees no silhouette. The trick is called counterillumination, and at this depth, it is the difference between being invisible and being eaten. Hatchetfish run the same defense and add to it. Their bodies are compressed thin, almost like a coin standing on edge, and their flanks are silvered. The silver is not decoration. It works as a mirror, throwing the surrounding blue back out so the fish disappears into it from the side. Their eyes point straight up, permanently, because in this zone, the only direction anything meaningful arrives from is above. Deeper in the layer, around 2,000 to 2,600 feet, is the barreleye. Its head is a transparent dome filled with fluid, and inside that dome sit 2 tubular green eyes that look upward through its own skull. The eyes rotate. The animal can hold its body flat and level, while the eyes swing forward to track something it has spotted overhead. There is nothing else built quite like it. Near the same depths sits the vampire squid, which is neither a squid nor a hunter. It lives inside the oxygen minimum zone, a band of water where dissolved oxygen falls low enough to exclude most active predators, and it survives there on the lowest metabolic rate measured in any cephalopod. It does not chase prey. It drifts and collects marine snow, the slow fall of dead material coming down from the sunlit water above. When something threatens it, it does not release ink. Ink is useless in the dark. It releases a cloud of glowing mucus instead and leaves while the attacker is looking at the light. Then there are the siphonophores, which are not single animals at all. They are colonies of specialized bodies strung together, some built to swim, some to catch, some to digest, operating as one organism. In 2020, an expedition run by the Schmidt Ocean Institute recorded one in the Ningaloo Canyons off Western Australia, coiled in a spiral, and estimated the outer ring at roughly 150 feet. It was reported as possibly the longest animal ever observed. That figure is an estimate taken from video rather than a measurement taken by hand, and it is worth saying so plainly. What the pressure does is less dramatic than most people expect, and the reason is instructive. Water does not compress. An animal made almost entirely of water, with no gas-filled space inside it, is not crushed at 90 atmospheres because there is nothing in it to crush. That is why so much of the life at this depth is gelatinous. Jellies and siphonophores and the soft-bodied hunters are not fragile down here. They are correctly built for it. The animals with a problem are the ones carrying gas. A swim bladder is a bubble, and a bubble obeys pressure. Bring a lanternfish up quickly, and the bladder expands against the body around it. That is why fish hauled from these depths in nets arrive dead, distorted, and looking almost nothing like the animal that was swimming an hour earlier. That single mechanical fact is responsible for one of the largest blind spots in ocean science. For most of the last century, what was known about this zone came from nets. A net dragged through the Twilight zone brings up the durable animals reasonably intact, and it destroys everything soft. The gelatinous half of the ecosystem arrives as unrecognizable material in the bottom of a bag. So the record that scientists built was not a record of what lives here. It was a record of what survives being caught. The barreleye is the cleanest example on file. It was formally described in 1939 from net specimens, and every one of those specimens was missing its head shield because the transparent dome tears apart on the way up. Nobody knew the dome existed. It took remotely operated vehicles to settle it. Researchers at the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute filmed the animal alive and intact in its own water and published the finding in 2009, 70 years after the species was named. The thing had a transparent head the entire time. Estimates of how much life is down here have moved just as far. Mesopelagic fish biomass was long put near 1 billion tons. Acoustic surveys from the Malaspina circumnavigation, published in 2014, argued the real figure could be 10 times that, which would make these fish the dominant vertebrate biomass on the planet. That number is still contested, and the disagreement is mostly about how much sonar overcounts or undercounts animals that are very good at not being detected. There is one more thing this zone does, every night, and it is the largest movement of animals on Earth. During the Second World War, sonar operators kept finding a solid seafloor a few hundred fathoms down in water known to be miles deep. It moved. It rose toward the surface after dark and sank again before dawn. They called it the false bottom. It was not a bottom. It was the Twilight Zone itself, millions of tons of fish and squid and krill, climbing at dusk to feed in the safer dark of the surface water and dropping back down at first light. It happens across the whole ocean, every night, and it has been happening the entire time. Which brings the descent to the floor of this zone. At about 3,300 feet, the last measurable sunlight ends, not dims, ends. Below that line, the only light in the ocean is light that living things make for themselves, and it stays that way for the next 2 miles. That layer has a name. It is called the bathypelagic, the midnight zone, and it is where this descent goes next. More than 80% of the ocean has never been mapped, observed, or explored. Almost all of what is left begins below the line this video just reached. Subscribe to follow the descent. Next time we go deeper.